All right, YouTube news back in Venezuela, because what is Nicolas Maduro doing right now? His country is basically starving. The economy has already stalled out and begun to shrink. People are rioting and burning buildings and clashing with the police. Maduro's obviously not particularly popular. Even people who love socialism and applaud Hugo Chavez are saying, "Oh, Maduro, he might be socialistic, but he's so inept. He's no Hugo Chavez." I don't lay all the blame on him. Part of it was Chavez's fucking problem with not investing oil money properly. But let's just leave it at that for the moment and focus on what's actually happening there. Instead of allowing himself to be forced to step down because it's clear he no longer has the ability to govern properly or the will of the population. Instead of talking to the opposition, saying, "Okay, we'll reform this and that," and throw them a few bones to calm them down, or ask for foreign aid from like the Chinese or something. What's he threatening to do now? He's threatening to dissolve their Congress. Yeah, the opposition that overwhelmingly holds their congressional system there, that's saying, "Oh, we've got enough signatures to force him out. Now we're going to collect more. We're tired of this shit. People are starving. People's kids are like dying in the hospital because they don't even have latex gloves." Instead of actually trying to tackle the situation, he has decided to plant his feet stubbornly and threaten to just get rid of Congress altogether so he can become a true dictator. You see, Maduro wants to be a dictator fairly badly. He doesn't want to be the presidente. He wants to be el dictator. He wants to be the tin horn dude, reigning over an extremely oil-rich nation that should look a lot like a more tropical version of Saudi Arabia, one that's actually got agriculture and in which there are like palm trees and shit. But instead, it just looks like a fucking swamp with a few aging and broken oil rigs in it. It's got to the point where that giant sort of brackish lake, I can't pronounce the name, Maracaibo or something like that, which is full of oil rigs. So many of them are leaking and just filled with shit that the entire area is just like devoid of life. It's just a giant oil slick because they never bothered to operate them properly. They never you have the opposite of a meritocracy. See, in the West, like my last video, I spoke about the elites rising up and how they're fucking long noses. They look down at them. At the entire population. They look down their noses at us all. They have the opposite problem in Venezuela. Instead of them being governed by a bunch of really stuffy people with PhDs, they're governed by a fucking bus driver who just carpetbagged a bunch of unqualified individuals into all the bureaus and central planning. So nobody there really has an idea how to run the economy. The opposition does. The opposition could do at least better than Maduro. But here's the kicker. Here's the really bad part that people should be more worried about. Even if the opposition were to call for Maduro's head and get it, and they just blew his head off with a tank at 100 yards, and they get rid of Maduro, and the guerrillas all go home or they kill them all, so that's not a problem, and things become calmer, does this actually change anything with regards to their economy? Not immediately. The oil prices are still very, very low, and they're still losing a hell of a lot of money. Their currency is still hyperinflated. They would have to suck the teats of the United States and the Europe and some of these other maybe Latin American countries. They would have to really suck up to the West in order to get things sorted out. The problem is the traditional sort of allies and friends they could lean on in the East, like the Cubans, like the Russians, like the Chinese, have their own problems right now. China's one step from a recession. Russia is in a recession. They also no longer have the projective force they did, in the 80s or the 90s necessary to really help their friends out to the greatest extent. At least in the case of Russia. Of course, China's come a long way since then, but they're already pumping most of their productivity back into their own economy to try to keep it afloat. It's like the U.S. plan to just pump funny money into the system on steroids. It's actually worse than what the United States, sort of the Federal Reserve people, are doing here. China's going to flatline 10 times worse and twice as fast as the U.S. We're going to have it easy compared to the Asian nations fairly soon. But as far as Venezuela, they're already starving. They're an oil-rich nation whose economy is almost solely oil. And that becomes a problem. They can't even really pump it out of the ground right now and run a profit. They sure as hell don't have the money to invest in making it more efficient so they can make more down the road. That's what they should have done a decade ago. They should have done that a decade ago, and people like Chavez and Maduro never did it. That's why they have economic problems. Everything that's happening there is the fault of bad central planning. Central planning can work if the most qualified and benevolent people are in charge of doing the planning. As we see, though, that is never the case. It's not even in the mixed economy like they have in China. The centrally planned, the government-funded and sponsored projects there, they fail at 2 or 3 times the rate of private projects. That's the problem with central planning. I would think that the world would understand this after centuries of trying this bullcrap. Unfortunately, Maduro never got the memo, and so their economy has already flatlined. I would not be surprised to see unrest down there continue to grow until other Latin states have no choice but to get involved. But now Maduro, all he can do is say, oh, the opposition wants to oust me, and they probably can do it, so I'm just going to dissolve the fucking Congress. I'm just going to get rid of him entirely and be a complete dictator. Well, I'm sure that'll go over well with the more than half of the Venezuelan population that's really pissed off. Oh, that's right, Maduro's already going after their guns, too. He's trying to make it so that people can't privately purchase firearms. Why? Because it's a prelude to martial law. It's a prelude to him becoming a full-fledged dictator. If that happens, you may see some of these other states get a little bit nervous and start talking about invasion. I think it'd be a bad idea. I think they should let Venezuelans rise up against Maduro, oust him himself, put the opposition into control, and then buddy-buddy with them and try to raise the standard of living there, try to invest in their oil infrastructure. It should stay within Latin America. The U.S. should take a hands-off approach and lean on like Colombia and Brazil. Get in there, invest into these things, take some of the proceeds back. It'll strengthen all of South America. It'll be great. It'll make it a shining example of functional democracies that have stable economies. Unfortunately, they might be not exactly hankering to get involved in a state like Venezuela, especially when it could literally collapse at any time now. That's about all. Peace out.